Welcome. You're listening to This Leader, the podcast. If you lead people and are seeking the transformational, high-impact secrets that will lead to greater joy and fulfillment in your work, will optimize your team performance, and will help you create a happy, highly productive workplace, then you are this leader and you're in the right place. I'm your host, Claire Laughlin, and each week my guests and I will explore the mindsets, techniques, and actionable strategies that will help you build the career, team, and organization of your dreams. Because I believe no one should have to suffer in a dysfunctional workplace. Let's get started. Have you ever looked around at your team and thought, what is wrong here? Why are my team members disengaged, resistant to change, just going through the motions, right? Meanwhile, you've tried everything. Better communication, team building, recognition, pizza parties, and nothing seems to work. Well, here's the uncomfortable truth that my guest today has spent 2 decades proving in schools, organizations, and leadership conference rooms across the country. Most of the time, it's not a people problem. It's a brain problem, and the leader holds more of the responsibility and the answer than they think. Dr. Lisa Riegel is a researcher, educator, and author who's built her life's work at the intersection of brain science and human systems. With a PhD in education policy and leadership from Ohio State, multiple books to her name, including her latest, Aspirations to Operations, and 2 decades of hands-on transformation work with schools and organizations, Lisa brings something most leadership experts simply don't: a genuine understanding of why people behave the way they do, rooted in brain science. What I love about Lisa is that she is so easy to talk to, and she makes complex topics fun, interesting, and truly memorable. Wait until you meet 2 parts of Lisa's brain, Harold and Bob, and how they so often steal the show from her CEO. Love that story. Anyway, Lisa is not a theorist just sitting in an ivory tower. She's been in classrooms, in crisis, and in the trenches of real organizational change. She has a gift for making neuroscience feel not just accessible, but immediately actionable. Today, we're going deep on brain-based leadership, what it actually means to create cultures where people feel safe enough to grow, change, and contribute at their best. So let's dive in. Here's my conversation with Dr. Lisa Riegel. Well, hello, Lisa. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
I've just been very happy to learn about you and about all the fascinating things you're doing. And so let's just start broadly. I want to hear in your words, how did you get to where you are with your career? You and I have a lot of similar interests and strangely kind of career pathways that seem like they intersect in a lot of different places. So just share with us a little more about you.
Sure. So I have had an incredibly crooked work pathway in my life. I graduated with an English literature degree, so I ended up getting jobs in tech sales. And then I ended up, after a couple of those jobs, I was selling automatic greasing systems for semis and off-road construction equipment, which was a real great fit. I was a suburban girl, never been on a tractor. So I was like, this, okay, but I'm up for a challenge. So I was doing that, and I was doing well by all marks. I was making money. I was supporting myself, and I didn't care at all. And then I woke up one morning and I was like, I don't care if anybody ever buys grease again. And I can't believe I have to do this for like the next 20 years. I can't do this. And so I had kind of what I call my quarter life crisis.
Yeah.
And I quit my job, and I was engaged at the time. I quit that too and said, that's not a good idea either. And I just got on a plane and went to Florida with a backpack and walked around on a little walkabout and just said, what do I want to do? How do I align, my passions and happiness with my pathway?
Yeah.
And so I decided I wanted to work for kids. And so I went back, I got my second degree in secondary education. And then I was a teacher for 9 years. I was an administrator for 2 years. And then I left because I had the opportunity to do a fellowship at Ohio State for my doctoral work.
Okay.
And so, of course, I was quitting my job because I had to go there full time. So at that point, I just said yes to everything. So I ended up organizing an economic education summit for the state. I did communications consulting. I did some leadership coaching. I had written a book for parent engagement. So I started doing parent trainings and working in schools. And so it just kind of grew. Like, to be honest, I just needed funding so that I could, like, feed my family. But it was all stuff that was interesting. And I'm just kind of interested in everything. So it worked out. And then I started to carve my way more into real school transformation work. I've always been a change maker.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of the assistant superintendent at the school that I used to teach, we met many years later and he actually hired me as a consultant to do some work. But he said, when I think of you, I think of the words positive deviant. And I was like, oh, I'm like, I kind of like that. I put that on my business card. So I started really challenging systems and doing this kind of leadership development work. And it's just kind of gone from there. And for a couple years, I was the Central Ohio mental health coordinator for schools because that's been, that's a real barrier for schools. So I was really getting into the brain science of behavior and work kind of into that trauma world and what does that do to your brain and body. And I've always been interested in science. So I really dug down into that. And then I started saying, well, real change starts in the brain. So leaders don't get this. And I taught at Ohio State in their leadership program, and it was all like org theory and structure and policy, but there just wasn't a whole lot about people. And it's like, the best policies shape change, but people make change. And we don't teach people how to engage people.
Yes.
So I really kind of dug into that. I wrote a book called Neuro. That book is about school transformation and how do we really transfer culture and teaching practices, routines to align with brain science. And my new book is out, and it's a leadership book. It's not just for educators, it's for anybody who leads teams. And it's called Aspirations to Operations, because I feel like we give leaders a lot of aspirational enthusiasm, but then they don't know how to make that change. And I would argue that a big reason why is because they don't know how to engage the people in the system.
Oh my gosh, that is spot on. I couldn't agree more. And again, it's so interesting because I think I have a bit of a background in instructional design as well. And I was a teacher for a while and I was, trained as a university instructor. And I've always thought that one thing that we're really missing in leadership is teaching people how to teach.
Yes.
I mean, it's such a broad difference between telling and guiding, coaching, teaching, developing, like it's an investment. We have to roll up our sleeves and invest in those people around us. And how do we get them from here to there? And I always find it just surprising how much we can glean from basic instructional work. Like, this is how people develop. This is how we teach. We need to be clear about outcomes. We need to guide people on a path. And what I really want to talk more with you about is like the brain science part of it. How do we work with things that we cannot see?
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of organizations I work with talk a lot about culture,
Yeah.
but like culture is not words. Culture is action.
Right.
And it's a collection of actions that become the way we do things. And people spend thousands of dollars on posters and, what words are we going to use and what are our core values? And you look at the alignment between what they say and what's going on, and it just doesn't match. And then their culture never improves.
Right.
And I think from a brain science perspective, the culture is the foundation because if you don't feel a sense of belonging,
Right.
then, it's like if you walk in a meeting and you go, oh, these are not my people. Or if you walk in and you go, these are my people, then you're like open and ready to contribute and share. And there's a trust built there. And I just think we have a whole lot of people that go into work and don't really feel a sense of belonging. And so that's important from a brain science perspective if you want this part of their brain to be productive and efficient.
Right. This front part, frontal lobes, the executive functioning part, right?
Right.
Okay, so I want to explore more about just the brain science part of it. But first, I just want to make this bridge between schools as an organization and organizational life, because I know that you work in both. And so just sort of tease out for us, how are schools a unique kind of organization? Where are the similarities? Where are some of the differences? Let's bridge this over to, workplace in a sense.
Sure. Well, I think that the thing that makes schools really unique is even though we talk a lot about collaboration, it's a solo sport to teach. And so you shut your door and you really have a lot of autonomy in what you're doing in your classroom, where in a normal workplace that's not an educational setting, there's a lot more interdependency.
Mm-hmm.
So it changes people's willingness to change. It also changes their willingness to collaborate and share.
Yeah.
And so the leadership, in a school really, I think the key challenge that they face is how do we build this as a team? We talk about team, but like then the actual action of my day, I'm alone all day.
Right.
So it's a different animal altogether.
Right. So you're thinking that, like, in the traditional workplace, there's more interdependence. I think a lot of organizations I work with, they really do struggle with silos, but within a vertical team, there's a lot of interdependence,
Yep.
right? And then in the educational environment, there is so much autonomy and people really are doing their own thing. So, what's the secret sauce there about change? And how do you introduce this idea of change and transformation? It's not just a policy, it's a matter of people. It's a matter of how we work together and how we make transformation. Give me your big picture there.
Sure. So I think that it comes down to we have to be strategic in 4 areas. We have to be strategic about culture. We have to be strategic about planning. It has to be clear and coherent, and we have to have a cadence that's realistic.
Yes.
We have to be strategic about engagement within how we coach, how we collaborate, and we have to be strategic about how we sustain. And that is through communication and celebration. And I think celebration is the thing that I see that leaders seem to have the most difficulty wrapping their head around. But if you have clarity of purpose and what you're doing, and you've got strong collaborative factors, then celebration becomes a much more natural thing. But I see a lot of celebration that is not authentic. So it doesn't really serve to build skills and enthusiasm and momentum in the actual what we're doing. It's just more appreciation type stuff that can fall flat.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about that for a minute because I agree. It's the pizza party, or just the other day. And I work with these organizations that are so well meaning. They want to provide these opportunities for people to come together, have connection time. And they literally are saying to me, look, I don't need this to be about content. I want this to be about people and just sharing with one another. And then on the other side of the fence, you have people who are like, why are they asking me to do this? I don't want to come to this pizza party. So there's such a disconnect there. But what would you tell an organization about how to structure really powerful and meaningful celebration that really helps move the needle, especially around culture change?
Yeah. So I think the first thing around culture change is, identifying what do I see and what do I hear if my values are being lived.
Okay.
And then part of it as a leader is making sure you're structuring your meetings, your coaching, all of that piece. So as a leader, you are living that and modeling that. But then I also think that you can celebrate. And in fact, it's funny, I had to have a procedure at the hospital and I was waiting and the doctor and the nurse came in and they were like, hey, we're going to be right back. We just have one quick thing that we do every day at noon. And I was like, okay. So they walked into the hallway and I could hear them. And the team was standing in a circle and appreciating each other. But they were appreciating each other like with concrete things. Like yesterday, I was totally slammed and you helped me do this and you really helped me relax. Or, this patient was really difficult to deal with and you stepped in and supported me. And they were giving really real time things. And then when they walked back in, the doctor's smiling, the nurse is smiling. And I said, do you guys do that every day? And he said, yeah, we do. And I said, what impact has that had? And he said, you know what? This is a hard job and it's fast and it's stressful. And he said, and it's just a 3 or 4 minute moment to appreciate that we're all in it together. And he said, it's just kind of reduced everybody's stress load because we feel like we're a team. And I was like, that's awesome. So that's one example of how you're actually living the value of teamwork, and taking time. But it wasn't like, oh, Claire, I think you're such a nice person. That's not concrete. It was, what have you done to contribute to this team, or what have other people done for you?
Right.
The other thing I've organized with some companies is I worked with one that they said, we don't have a family feel. Like people come and they do their job, but they're not connected. There aren't strong ties. So I said, okay, well, what if we created an incentive program for them and give them lots of options? So one option we did was the Healthy Lunch Club.
Okay.
So you sign up. So if you have 15 people who sign up, then that means only every 15 days, I'm responsible for bringing in food to feed everybody. And it had to be healthy food, which is nice because then you're not eating junk, you're not running out. And you had to put your recipe there. And then people would bring their food in. And there's something about breaking bread with people or sharing food.
Yeah.
And so I might come and be like, Claire, that was such good chili. I'm going to take your recipe and use it. It just gave opportunities for authentic conversations based around food. And if you didn't want to participate, you didn't participate. But if you did, you got a punch on a punch card. We called it punch it up,
Okay.
and you got a punch. And then like another one was there was a woman there who did yoga. She was like a yoga instructor.
Yeah.
And she said, well, I'll do a yoga session each week, like right after work for like a half hour, 45 minutes. So if people went to the yoga session, they got a punch. We did a walking club. We did enjoy the arts. If people went and watched a movie together or did something outside of the workplace together, they got 2 punches. And then it was like, if you got so many punches, you got, swag. If you got more punches, you got a free lunch or, things like that. And it was voluntary, opt in.
Yeah.
And it started to snowball because people started to see that these relationships were forming. One of the things we did was a morning happy hour. So the manager brought in coffee and donuts, but the rule was you're not allowed to talk about work. You come to the happy hour and you just talk about your kids. And in the beginning, he had like topics, but then after a couple months of that, he didn't even need topics. People came in and, talk about your dog, talk about your kids, talk about, what do you do outside of this place? And it just started to build some of these authentic connections between people. And then the culture started to improve and the teamwork and helping each other started to improve. People were more willing to celebrate what each other was doing because it wasn't a matter of like, she's always looking for, somebody to toot her horn. They saw each other more as peers and teammates and support.
Yeah, it's magical what happens when people know a little something about each other, right? They see each other with so much more wholeness. And I just think that's so beautiful. I love those programs. That sounds awesome. Because, you do invite people in and you give them lots of options. And it's not like the organization is making up the one day that we're going to, have the pizza party or whatever. And I'm not trying to down that because I actually do think that there's a lot of good intention behind that. And it works in some places really, really well. But I like the idea of options and having it be specific to the kind of culture you're trying to create.
Right. And I think the other thing is like the pizza parties and, they're expensive. They're a one-timer. The other thing is I know, and I've done these before where you go in and do team building exercises or things like that in a workshop. But again, you're not connecting human to human.
Right.
And it goes back to that sense of belonging. When we feel a sense of belonging, our biologic system is relaxed and ready to be productive and think. And so, those are nice, but they work really well when you already have the interpersonal relationships developed.
Right.
I think they don't serve to effectively develop and sustain anything. If you come in and have a workshop and we do a couple team building activities, it's fun.
Right.
And people will be like, oh, yeah, that's fun. We had a good time.
Right.
But it's not going to build strong ties among those people that are going to last because it's a one and done. But if it becomes part of the culture, then it really sticks.
Right. I love that. Talk to me a little bit about brain-based change. Right? You are an expert in brain-based change. And so give us the lay of the land there. What is the difference between organizations that just sort of follow a structured approach to change? Oh, this is the communication pathway. This is how we communicate about change, that kind of thing, versus the organizations that integrate this knowledge and understanding about what's happening in the brain and how does that accelerate your pathway?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing to know is that our behavior, academic, work behavior, social behavior, young, old, doesn't matter. Our behavior is the intersection of biology and context. And so as a leader, if you understand the biology of behavior, which I can share a little bit about, it makes you reframe problems. And so that you have solutions that actually are brain-based solutions. And then ultimately you have control over the context. So if you understand the brain's need for safety and belonging, then the context that you create is different. So the biology piece, the most important thing is to understand how the brain creates perceptions because everybody's perception is their reality, right? So when you think about perceptions, what actually happens in your brain, 80% of the thinking that we do is below our nose, which is in the limbic system. So it's unconscious. So we think we have a lot more control over who we are, but we're actually doing a lot of unconscious thinking that's telling our CEO how to feel, how to respond, how to react. So helping people to build some self-awareness of what's going on below their nose can make them have better self-awareness, better self-regulation, and better self-control. So what's happening below And I kind of break the brain into a company. Just like in any company, you have departments. We think of the brain as one thing, but it functions very fragmented at times.
Right.
So you have a data department, which is your thalamus. And I name them. Mine's Harold. So Harold is my data department. His job is to look at all the things in the environment. And then his first thing is to say, okay, what is this like? Because if every new experience was novel experience, our brains would explode. So we look for patterns, right?
Right.
So Harold will go into our sensory memory bank, and we think of our memories as stored like a giant library, but they're not. We don't go and pull out the memory and read it. They're fragmented into various departments in our brain. So in order to make a semantic memory or a meaningful memory, we need our CEO to be like, hey, I need this from my striatum. I need this from my hippocampus. I need this from my amygdala. And then I'm going to put it up here in my brain and I'm going to information process it and make meaning out of it. And Harold doesn't have access to that. Harold has access to one set of memories, and those are sensory associations. Say that you've lived a life with repeated experiences that you have been, like, for example, for me, I grew up in a family that was like, if I came home with an A minus, it was like, what happened? High achieving, very demanding. And so for me, failure was a huge stress inducer because it was tied to shame, right? So I have this filter in my brain that says when I feel challenged or I feel like I'm not going to succeed, my body dysregulates. And I don't think this up here and say, oh, I might fail. I should really ramp myself up. It's all done in that unconscious part. So understanding that reality, if you think of reality like a banana,
Mm-hmm.
you think of all of these filters like spaghetti strainers or colanders. What happens in our brain is Harold takes all that data, makes those sensory associations, and pulls up a series of colanders or filters, and then jams the banana through it to write his report. So his report, the banana, after it goes through the colander, doesn't look like the banana anymore. It's still a banana, but it's different. So our perception and our reality is not the same. And every single human has different folders and filters and all of that. And so when you're thinking of leading change, you're going to deal with people who have aversion to change for a number of reasons.
Right.
So understanding that when they are pushing back, it's not because they're a deadbeat. It's not because they don't believe in the change. It's not because they don't want the change. Could be a fear of failure. Could be they really value feeling like an expert and now their job's going to change and they're not going to be the expert in the company anymore. There's a million reasons. So by understanding how perceptions are formed, what we realize is the reaction we are getting in the moment
Yeah.
may have nothing to do with the moment. It
Right.
may have to do with faulty sensory associations that we made when we were kids that are still in our brain. It has everything to do with our past and a little bit to do with the moment. So if a smart brain-based leader will be like, okay, there is something in this context, whether it's the tone of my voice or what I'm saying or the volume of my voice or the people in the room and the relationships, that there's something in this context that is dysregulating Joan, whoever, right? So instead of going after Joan with the what, we're doing this change. What's the problem? Why can't you do it? Going at it with like, what is the fear behind this? What is happening and how do I alleviate the fear? Because our brain is wired to be afraid because it keeps us safe. We want to know when danger's happening. So Harold plays a big role. And then the second part of the brain is who I call Bob. That's your amygdala, and he's your security manager. And so Bob is the one who decides how hard to hit the panic button. And if he just taps it, then a message goes right up to your CEO that goes, hey, I'm not sure how to respond, so we need you to weigh in. But if he wails on it, then the message that goes up says, hey, go get a cup of coffee. You're in danger. Harold and I'll take care of this. We'll call you when you're safe. And that's why, like, we get in a fight and then after we're like, why do we say that? Like, that's not even who I am. So why was I saying that? It's because you didn't. Harold and Bob were in charge, right? So helping leaders and people themselves to understand what are those things that upset me or trigger me? What is it? But then to go a step deeper and go, why? What's the pattern? What's the underlying fear? And how do I try to help alleviate some of those fears through the way I communicate or coach or set up the change can make a big difference.
Right. I'm hearing two layers there. And one is at the personal level, sort of, let's call this person the recipient of the change.
Mm-hmm.
The recipient of the change needs to approach the situation with a degree of real self-awareness. What's happening for me here? What am I telling myself about what this change really means? How much of this do I think is really true? And how much of this is based on what's happened in the past? Although that might be a very hard question to answer, right? Based on what you said, like we really think that this is true, right?
Yeah. And I think the other problem is that we live in a society right now that the context of our world right now is scary. And, people like whatever the issue is, politics, AI, global warming, like, national security, whatever your worries are, there's a lot of divisiveness. You've got social media just constantly hammering you with negativity. So, our herald in our brain is building all kinds of filters right now that are when this, I'm uncomfortable. And so, we're already elevated in our stress levels. And we see that in the statistics around mental health and burnout and quiet quitting and all of that kind of stuff. So, as a leader, I think one of the things I always try to counsel them is don't shy away from the emotion of change.
Right.
Like, give people a chance to verbalize, this makes me nervous, even if they don't know why, but give them a chance to acknowledge that change is stressful. And this is how we're going to do it together so that we can mitigate that stress. And this is how we're going to work as a team. And then you can start to kind of tamp down on some of the resistors. But you also have to understand some people resist for different reasons. So one message doesn't undo the resistance across the board.
Right. It feels like people need a lot of acceptance and reassurance and understanding of the why and the what, right? We want to know what's the promise out there that we're heading towards? What's the pathway that's going to get us there? What's my part in, a successful transition? All those kinds of things. And we need time to digest all that and integrate it.
And I think most important for brain based leadership is the leader's self awareness. And it's interesting. I used to teach at Ohio State and leadership program, and we always had people write their leadership platform, which I think is the dumbest thing because your leadership platform should be like one sentence: I lead so that my team will follow. It's not about you, it's about what your team needs. And I think we have a lot of those filters in our brain about what it means for us to be in power or what it means for us to be the leader or to have the voice or the decision making.
Right.
And then I watch leaders get super defensive and angry with their teams when they're not following them, as opposed to because it's about them.
Right.
Versus turn the mirror around. It's about you're a supporting character, not the main character, right? So, how do you support your team? They're the main characters of the story because they're the ones that are going to have to do the change.
Yeah, absolutely. You're not the hero. You're just the guide.
You're the hero when they are the heroes. I had an amazing principal one time, and if you would have asked me at that time, how important is the principal? I would have been like, not really. I mean, we all do our jobs. We're so good at it. We're all together. And then she left, and I got a really crappy leader in her place, and a couple of them. And I watched the same people who were super dedicated, do whatever it takes, kid focused. I watched these same people turn into whiny, complaining, stressed out, angry people who were not as effective in the classroom anymore. And so that was kind of when I started my journey in leadership, where I was like, this is the key.
Yes.
And before that, I didn't recognize the importance of a good leader.
Oh, I just have to echo that because this is so important because from those new leaders, those replacement leaders, they probably came in and they were like, what is wrong with these people? I think that is such a key message for leadership. Like, leaders, listen, this is so important. If your team is not engaged, they're not performing, they're stressed, they're burned out, all these things, like that is a wake up call. Hold up that mirror because that is the leader's ability. That's the point, sort of the leverage that they have, right? If I hold up the mirror and I look back at how I'm leading this group, there's a million questions you could ask yourself. Am I leading them towards something inspiring? Am I understanding and connecting with those individuals that I'm asking to come along on this journey? Am I giving people a meaningful pathway to get from where they are to where we're headed? How am I talking about this? Have I engaged them in the vision? So many questions. But yeah, those are the questions, not what's wrong with them, right?
No. When I'm working with leaders, I always kind of listen for the leadership struggles and areas for growth and how they complain about their staff. So if they're like, well, my staff just hates meetings. And I'm like, that's a leadership problem because people don't hate meetings. People hate dumb meetings. And if you're doing dumb meetings that aren't being run well, or I'll hear them say, they just don't even listen to me when I'll email them all this stuff and then they don't read it. And I'm like, okay, so then at the meeting, do you go over everything you sent? So why would you read it? It's more productive not to read it because I'm going to have to listen to it again, you know?
Right.
It's like, or my team, I just can't get them to change or whatever. It's like, well, you haven't set the conditions for change. So I think some of it is the leader recognizing their ownership in culture and in transformation and support and celebration and all of that. And if they're not being strategic about that and they're not doing it through a human centered lens, then they can do a whole lot of work and not see the outcomes that they want.
Absolutely, absolutely. You have this 8C framework, and I have a 6C framework. Tell me about your 8C framework.
Sure. So I detail it in my new book. It's Aspirations to Operations, and that's the purpose of it. It is an operational framework that helps leaders make transformation stick. And so it's not going to give you lofty ideas of, oh, you need a better culture. It's going to tell you things that you can actually do that will make that happen. And each chapter of the book has like a stop and think. And I really encourage readers to like have a journal because again, the self-aware leader is the stronger leader. And so taking time to really think about themselves throughout the book. But the framework's kind of divided into 4 areas. The first is culture. And how do you get the foundation? Because anything you build on a shaky foundation isn't going to stand. So the culture has to be a strategic initiative for any leader. Then there's 3 planning C's. So the 3 planning C's are clarity, coherence, and cadence. And what's interesting is how many times I ask leaders, so if these folks do what you want them to do, what will you see and hear? And they can't tell me. And so if they can't tell me that, then they can't celebrate it, they can't reinforce it, they can't support it. And then people are like, I don't know what to do. And then that breeds stress, right? And so that clarity piece is really important. The other is coherence of building off of what you already have. Like I've seen companies that will buy a new software system, but now they have another software system. So they're doing repetitive work. And the staff's like, are you kidding me? Like, why am I doing, even if the new system is a better option, they didn't honor the coherence of what they already had.
Right.
And then the third is cadence, and that's really around how fast can a change happen. And if it's a big change, you kind of need to set up some stepping stones. I feel like a lot of times we say, this is what we're doing now. So here's a pole vault, go jump over the cliff between where you are and where we're going. So we have to build some cadence into that and recognize that different people will have a different cadence. If you have somebody who's a brand new employee that's just trying to learn the business, then they're not going to be able to make changes as fast.
Yeah.
Or some of them might be able to make changes really fast because they don't have bad habits. And then, if you've got people who are seasoned, you're really monkeying with their identity because they know they're good at it and you're asking them to scrap it. So that cadence piece is really important.
Right.
Once you get a really good planning for change, then you have the engagement C's. So the engagement C's are collaboration and coaching. And this goes back to every meeting. You've got to plan meetings strategically so that you're honoring people's time, that you're doing good decision making. So I talk about there's 4 ways of talking. So there's like directives, there's dialogues, there's discussions, and there's data debriefs. And if you frame your talking, like if you are getting ready to make a change and you say, okay, from down high, they want us to do this. Let's have a dialogue about what we could do. Purpose of that dialogue is to seek to understand. Everybody gives ideas. You get your unintended consequences, your consequences, you get all of that kind of out there. And then you move into a discussion. The purpose of the discussion is to come to a decision. And what I see happen a lot of times is you get a couple chatty Cathys in the room and they start talking and you move right into a decision without really understanding the problem. And then you get in and it's not working and you have to back it up. And every time you're doing that, people are learning helplessness. I'll just wait till they figure it out to make my change.
Right.
And then directives is the other one I see a lot. And a directive means the decision was made. So the purpose of a directive is to clarify. So what does this mean for action for each person? And I've been in meetings before where a leader is giving clarity around the directives and the team digresses into a conversation about whether or not the decision should happen. And it's like, no, the decision is done. And then that breeds frustration and anger and all of that kind of stuff. So the collaboration chapter helps leaders understand how to schedule meetings, how to structure meetings, and then how to come to a shared consensus and the steps involved in that, because you've got to get consensus from people during that shared time so that they don't walk off and then badmouth the decision.
That's right.
And then the coaching piece is really, again, the brain science. What is the underlying fear and how do you help to support somebody to overcome that? And then the final two C's are about sustainability, and they are communication and celebration.
Oh, good.
And that gets down again to how do people want to be communicated with? Not what do you want to say? We do a very egocentric communication. I have stuff to tell you. I wrote it down. I gave it to you. Why aren't you doing what I told you?
Right.
Turning it around to strategic communication of what is the action or reaction I want? Who are the people that I need to get that reaction or action from? How do I create the communication so that those people will do the intended action or reaction? And so it changes a little bit, the way that you construct communication.
Love it. I am getting this book. Where can we get this book, Lisa? Where is it available?
So it's called Aspirations to Operations. It's on Amazon. And if there's educators listening, the NeuroWell book is also on Amazon. So if you go to Amazon and look up the title, or you can just look up my name and my author page will come up and it'll have all my books on there.
Fantastic. We'll put all that in the show notes as well. But as we wrap up, so fascinating. Great discussion. Thank you so much. But I want to ask you, from this sort of circuitous path you took in your career, researcher, practitioner, educator, strategist, author, all the different things that you've done, grease salesperson, all those things. What would you tell your past self about what it really takes? Like if you could just go like, hey, past self, there's one thing you got to know to make change stick. Something you had to learn the hard way. What would that be?
I think it's that we have to have a genuine curiosity about people. And, I grew up, my dad, he was a physician and we had lots of parties with adults and I was expected to be delightful and serve and do things. And through those experiences, I learned to talk to almost anybody and to find them interesting. Like I find people interesting. And I think that that has helped me so much because when I look at change or transformation or a problem, I see the problem and I'm a data person, so I can see the data and what we need to do. But when I start to problem solve, I always start with the people.
Yeah.
And so what can we do to support and to, engage these people so that they feel good? Because I truly believe humans are meant to be productive. We're meant to be industrious. And when we're not feeling like we're contributing, we don't feel good about that. And so all these people that are out there quiet quitting and they don't feel good about it. They're not happy. And I think that we ultimately want to be happy. And if we have understanding the brain, self-awareness, self-regulation, and self-control, we can be happier, healthier, and more successful.
I love it. I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Lisa. This has been an absolute delight. I'm going to go get your book. And like I said before, this will all be in the show notes for folks with your author page and everything else. So thanks for being here, Lisa.
Thanks for having me. And if people are interested, I do keynotes, I do workshops, I do book studies. So if there's leaders out there, get the book, read it and go, my team really needs this. Like I can come in and really help to direct some of the processing and self-awareness development.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Lisa. Make it a great day.
Thanks, you too.
That was so fun. After we stopped recording, I just have to tell you, I said to Lisa, okay, we need to be friends. She was great. Today's conversation was a genuine reminder that the most powerful leadership tool isn't a new framework or better communication strategy necessarily. It's developing a deeper understanding and empathy for what's actually driving the humans in front of you. Here's a few things I'm still thinking about. That 80% of our behavior happens below the conscious level. Really? 80%? That's amazing to me. That means a lot of things, but it means the resistance that you might be seeing on your team probably has very little to do with the change itself and is really driven by our subconscious reactions. So we absolutely need to understand more about that. Here's another thing. A culture of real recognition and belonging isn't built with posters or pizza parties, right? We know that. It's built through small actions that become the way we do things around here. And that the most important question a leader can ask isn't like, what's wrong with my team, but what am I creating the conditions for? I'm so grateful to Lisa for bringing her science and her stories to this conversation. Her book, Aspirations to Operations, is on Amazon. And whether you're leading a team of 5 or an organization of 500, it's the kind of practical, human-centered framework that will actually help you move from intention to action, powerful action. I'll link everything below in the show notes. So here's what I want to leave you with today. I want you to think about one person on your team who you think has been resisting or disengaging a little bit. And before you problem solve the behavior, get really curious about the person. That's where Lisa always starts, and I think it's where we should too. So if today's episode sparked something for you, I'd love to hear about it. Leave a review, share this with a leader in your world, and please make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what's coming next. Until then, make it a great day.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode. To learn more about my services and for lots of free resources and additional tools to enrich your journey, visit my website and subscribe to my newsletter at clairelaughlin.com. If you have a question about leadership, teams, or organizational culture you'd like me to address on the podcast, please reach out to me at support@clairelaughlin.com and connect with me on social channels at Claire Laughlin Consulting. Until next time, lead the way.